Kazakhstan or Dubai? Where to build the future?
Dubai.
The costliest lesson for a Kazakhstani entrepreneur? What is it?
Financial losses.
Kazakhstani business in Dubai. Growth or escape?
Both growth and escape.
Does Dubai solve the problem or just move it?
It adds more problems.
Most don't see the crack until it turns into a collapse. What does an experienced eye notice?
An experienced eye won't let a crack happen.
AI will replace lawyers and accountants. Or will it make them stronger?
It'll make them stronger, of course. No one will replace us. Don't even dream of it.
What do you know about the next 5 years that others don't?
What kind of question is that, Mikhail? What can I say? Stay human. Stay human.
Many successful Kazakhstani entrepreneurs have something in common. A company here and a company there. 2 sets of rules, 2 ways to introduce yourself. 2 lives. Adlet Mazhitov started helping build this model before it went mainstream. Today, he lives exactly like that and sees from the inside what it really means. Adlet, welcome.
Greetings, Mikhail.
You're listening to Business Kazakhstan, an xChief Central Asia media project. As we know, Adlet, an entrepreneur, just a regular entrepreneur, doesn't wake up one day thinking, it's time to open a company somewhere else. And my first question to you is this. You entered this niche when few in Kazakhstan even realized it existed. What did you see then that others didn't see at that moment?
I'd like to say that this field has always existed. It's just that over a certain period, the last 5 or 6 years, it's gained a lot of popularity. And in my view, there are 2 reasons why entrepreneurs consider a company abroad. First, it's an escape from something. Second, it's a desire, a drive to reach something. So it's either a factor that starts affecting you negatively and you look for other areas, other jurisdictions, or you've outgrown the country or place where you are and you want growth. Basically, you're running either from something or towards something. And so these 2 reasons are the main driving force behind relocating your business.
But still, as we know from sociological examples, if there are many states instead of one large unified state, there will be chaos. Because we don't end up with, based on your example, millions of companies all over the world. It doesn't matter what business, even Ashot's apples. He doesn't have a company right away in, say, Ireland or somewhere else. So people still face some kind of limitations, right?
Well, of course there are limitations. First of all, you have to understand what your motivation is as an entrepreneur. Because if you're, say, selling fruit at a stand, you can do that kind of business anywhere, whether it's in Dublin, London, Bali, the Maldives, anywhere, even in Kazakhstan. In this case, you're likely tied to your physical location. So if you physically want to be in another country or city, but all you know is how to sell fruits and vegetables, then it's generally not a problem to do it anywhere, and the barrier to entry for such a business is quite minimal. If you have experience, you can basically set up shop anywhere and start doing it. If your business is complex, requiring specific expertise, qualifications, or heaven forbid licensing, like if you're launching yet another cryptocurrency, then you're restricted by regulatory frameworks, and you can't just move to any jurisdiction. You need to understand how the laws work there, what's allowed and what isn't. So it all depends on what you do, on the type of activity. The simpler the activity, the easier it is for you to relocate anywhere. The more difficult and complex it is, then your approach needs to be much more well thought out.
Interesting. And it's also interesting if an entrepreneur suddenly comes to you and announces, just bursts through the door and says, Adlet, I want to go to Dubai. I want to see my business there in the UAE. What should I do? And most consultants just start processing documents indiscriminately without even explaining the details or providing a roadmap of what to expect. What is the first thing you ask?
First of all, I asked the person what they actually know about doing business in Dubai, because this market is quite specific due to the Arabic mentality and the legal regulations. The barrier to entry is quite high, yes. Starting a business in Dubai is a more expensive process than in other jurisdictions. And of course, you need to understand the goal of opening a business in Dubai. Different entrepreneurs can have different goals, and their motivations can vary as well. So, first, I need to find out what they know about Dubai and why they suddenly got this idea about the Emirates, like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, or Ras Al Khaimah. Because the Emirates consist of the United Arab Emirates isn't just a name, it's a union of different emirates. And each emirate has its own pros and cons for doing business as well. Well, as is often the case, Dubai is on everyone's lips because it's the most international city, open to new businesses. There, everything is quite well regulated and there are many opportunities. First of all, I ask the potential client, why Dubai, right? Why the Emirates? Why now? So I try to gather a sort of history from the client and determine the most suitable zone for them based on my expertise.
But in this case, a Kazakhstani entrepreneur is looking toward Dubai. What does practice usually show they're actually looking for? So they come in and say, I want this. You ask them, but is there some kind of statistic on what they actually want? And what is that one thing they don't say out loud? Some kind of hidden goal?
Well, the main goal is, of course, tax optimization, right? A word that's almost a slur these days. So, all entrepreneurs look for a jurisdiction where they can pay as little tax as possible. And in Dubai, the system is set up so that you can generally pay taxes at a zero rate, meaning you don't pay practically any taxes at all, right? So, you can structure your business in such a way that your income is not taxable. There's also a type of client who's thinking about their physical relocation to Dubai, right? For example, I've had clients whose children were studying in the Emirates at a university, and accordingly, they were also planning and are planning their move there. Since they're in digital business, they can basically do it anytime, move there, right? But they need it explained, a clear roadmap laid out. How, what for, why? But the natural motivation is that their children are already there. And another type of client is people who have earned their capital in a certain way, and now they need to land that capital somewhere. Dubai has a lot of experience and expertise in this area. Here we're probably talking more about offshore companies, right? So the goal of such clients is capital preservation, landing it, preserving capital, and then further investment, investing those funds into the Emirates market.
Well, if we take and somehow summarize the profile, so to speak, of such a client, is this a conversation about ambition or about fear? Primarily, and how do you distinguish between them in the first meeting?
Well, again, as I said at the very beginning, motivation can be both ambition and fear, right? That is, there is, for example, a type of entrepreneur who has already achieved quite a lot of success in Kazakhstan. In the retail sector, e-commerce, in the sector of, for example, Horeca, right? And they want to try their hand at the international level. And believe me, there is no better jurisdiction for this than the Emirates for Kazakhs, for Kazakhstanis, because our mentality is quite similar to the Arabs, but at the same time, you have access to the international market because Dubai is a very international city. There you can test various hypotheses, try to compete with brands, those that are already established. And many Kazakhstanis then just go there to try themselves out and try to prove to themselves that on the international market, at the international level, they can also build a successful business.
Now, speaking again about international business, right, well, you must have decided for yourself that it was Dubai, right? You didn't take, for example, Uruguay, where there's a tax holiday for 12 years, in some cases 5 years. Well, I mean, in any case, it's like a semi offshore zone there, Cyprus, or say the most popular ones like Singapore, Hong Kong, for example, or something else. But you chose Dubai specifically, and it turns out you yourself have gone through a certain path of your client profile. And maybe you even see yourself in some way when you talk to them. So, how did that happen?
Well, first of all, I can say that I had been thinking about relocation for quite a long time and was choosing between two directions, China and the Emirates. But for my family, of course, the Emirates were a more preferable option because, first of all, it's an English speaking environment. Secondly, a clear culture, clear local customs, and in general, despite the fact that there are many different nationalities in Dubai, right, and tolerance for different faiths, many still stay within boundaries because it's a Muslim country and Islamic law, Sharia, is quite widespread. Many live by and adhere to these norms, and this prevents certain types of provocative actions. So I did some research myself and decided that Dubai, based on these parameters, suits me best. Also, of course, the tax rates, which are zero. That is, you can literally free your income from taxes without any great effort. Of course, at the start, you need someone specialized, like a guide or consultant who will help you navigate through all these complexities. Overall, I'd say Dubai is currently the number one destination in the world. The Emirates, yeah, in terms of safety and clear legal regulations. So basically, everything is very straightforward. You feel safe out on the streets. The business environment is competitive, but it's a friendly kind of competition because you can share your experiences, attend networking sessions, meet new people, and you compete on a level playing field because the laws apply to everyone equally.
In other words, it's a favorable business environment that would be a crime to ignore, one might say.
Well, and not just that. For example, I can tell you about my own personal experience. My quality of life has improved significantly. I've started sleeping better. I mean, my sleep quality is stabilized. The general level of anxiety we see in post Soviet countries is minimal in Dubai. So, overall, the environment's quite welcoming. People are very friendly and reliable. Yeah. I'm not trying to idealize it, but you can feel it on an energetic level. And maybe the sunlight has a big impact. Yeah, it's a country where the sun shines almost every day year round, and you just soak up that energy. The whole atmosphere around you helps keep you motivated. And you see the heights people reach there, which also motivates you to strive for those same heights. And the clear legal environment. As a lawyer, I can say it's very important when you see the law, you understand how it works, you understand how it's enforced, and you see that everyone follows these rules. It's very inspiring.
Most entrepreneurs generally get lost when they have to switch between two worlds. For instance, someone might have an office in Astana and another in, say, Dubai or some other city, and you've been doing this for a while now. So the question arises, is it different for you personally, working across several jurisdictions? Or is it already like Zen for you? Like I've achieved Zen, and that's enough for me.
It's very difficult. It's very hard to get used to when you're running a business in two or more countries. I'd even say that I still haven't developed the habit of separating it in my head, and I'm still adjusting.
I think our listeners and viewers are wondering, what language do you use most often for this business?
Well, overall, as usual, it's Kazakh, Russian, and English, three languages. Seems like that's enough. Of course, I'd like to master Chinese to an ideal level as well, because there are so many Chinese investors, who are interested in the Emirates market. That's a bit of an oversight on my part, but I plan to catch up. And of course, Arabic. I mean, for a comfortable life in the Emirates, English is more than enough. But as someone who's interested in different foreign languages, I want to master the Arabic language to have a warmer connection with the locals, with the citizens of the Emirates. And there's a very large Arabic speaking community in the Emirates, in Dubai in particular. So it can help in business as well. And I also want to pay a certain tribute to this country. Yeah. I really admire how everything is set up there. So that's why I plan to learn Arabic too.
Speaking of, again, double standards, Kazakhstan, Dubai, the UAE. Are there things that work in Kazakhstan but don't work in Dubai because they're commonplace or not disclosed on regular internet resources? Where is the biggest gap?
I can say that information on the internet is more than enough. There's too much of it. And finding and filtering the right information for yourself, not everyone can handle that on their own. Of course, there are many consultants who also offer their services, but I can't say that they're all honest, because many consultants, so to speak, charge a high price for their services out of nowhere. And they're not always competent in this matter. And they don't look for the most beneficial option for you. For them, the main task is to close a specific request they were approached with, get their payment, and disappear. Personally, I went through it by studying a lot of information on various internet resources, reaching out to qualified consultants, as well as consulting with many people through connections from Kazakhstan, Russia, even India. So I did some kind of cross-section for myself to understand how consultants in this market work, how they value their services, what their approach is. And I can say that consultants earn their keep, because switching from how you're used to business being done in Kazakhstan to how business is conducted in the Emirates is very difficult, because it's a completely different world there. It's a different world, and even though they claim to have English law there, English legal norms are in effect, and a British-centric business style, there's a certain flavor in the form of middle management, right? Which mostly consists of people from India and Pakistan. Well, accordingly, you need to understand the specifics of this market. I mean, there's a huge layering of different cultures, everything's in English, and business is done completely differently than in Kazakhstan.
And speaking of all these many people, you've seen hundreds of people, maybe even more. I just don't know.
Most likely more.
Yeah, who've tried living between these two homes? Who manages and who breaks at this crossroads?
As a family man, you know this, Mikhail. I have everything under control in that regard. I mean, it was much easier for me to handle work matters because I have a reliable support system in my wife, for which I'm very grateful. I can say there's a downside here too, if you move with your family. Your expenses increase many, many times over. So if you come alone with the goal of doing business, it'll probably be quite easy to handle some everyday things. Because the service market is very broad, and for just about any price you can think of, you can find people who will come over and install an air conditioner for you, fix it if it breaks, hem your pants, and take care of all sorts of little things like that. There are so many different services available, really covering a wide range of needs and budgets. But here, it all depends on your communication skills and, well, on how open you are to another world, because you shouldn't compare the level of service you get here in Kazakhstan, for example, and there in Dubai. There, people come from different markets, from Bangladesh, from Angola, from Uganda. And they're used to thinking and acting in a completely different way. And comparing them to our craftsmen, say from Kazakhstan, well, you can't. You just can't. You just have to understand that it's a different, separate world. Moving with a family is much easier emotionally, right? Because you're not alone. You feel the fact that you have backup support in the form of your family. And on one hand, it's emotionally supportive. On the other hand, psychofunctionally, you behave quite differently because you need to provide for your family. With a family, it's probably easier. I had that experience, and in general, many of my acquaintances moved with their families. A completely different level of demand is created immediately. You drop anchor in this place, and it's easier to somehow set up, assimilate, and accept that you're no longer in Kazakhstan. When it's just you or maybe two of you, and you move, you don't get very attached to the place. And so you leave yourself some room for a fallback plan. But in my opinion, you shouldn't do that, because there's always the temptation to go back at the very first sign of trouble.
How huge is the difference in jurisdictions from a legal standpoint, let's say, compared to the United Arab Emirates? I mean, how obvious is it, and how difficult is it to adapt to it if a person has never worked anywhere except Kazakhstan and they're planning to move to the Emirates through you?
The difference is massive, I would say, yeah. Well, let's start with the fact that the AIFC, the Astana International Financial Center, was inspired by the DIFC, the Dubai International Financial Center. It was so heavily inspired that some legal acts were even copied word for word. Well, that's just a small side note. And in the Emirates, there are many so-called free zones, special economic zones, a huge number of them. I think if you take all the Emirates together, there are over 100. In Kazakhstan, we only have one, the AIFC, and soon, in the near future, a new special economic zone called Alataw will be opening. So, in Kazakhstan, the level of interaction between the business community and even the AIFC is quite low. Many people here don't know that such a zone exists in Kazakhstan, where English law applies, where there are certain tax benefits, and where business is conducted in English. But overall, I believe it's the first step toward entering the international market. So in Kazakhstan, if you're in services, especially financial or consulting, I'd advise everyone to start with the AIFC to see how it works, what the business environment is like there, and then move on to the international market. In the Emirates, it will be easier, of course, if you already have experience doing business internationally, because the requirements for corporate documents are different. In general, the regulatory framework of this so-called English law, how should I explain it? It's case law. That is, there's a certain set of internal regulations that everyone follows. But, for example, the difference between English law and civil law, which is mostly used in Kazakhstan, is significant. In civil law, there are specific codes which everyone follows, or rather, whose rules everyone dances to, so to speak, live and do business. In English law jurisdictions, these norms can be very easily changed, new ones introduced, so certain hypotheses can be tested. And overall, we're saying that when signing a contract, you're free to agree on absolutely any articles, absolutely any clauses, without limiting yourself to the framework of specific codes. I'd use this kind of analogy. In my view, when English law spread so widely across the world, it was when certain powerful companies were being formed in Britain, right? Like the British East India Company? Yeah, I think that's the one. Yeah. So there was a Dutch one and a British one. And when the British started spreading their influence, they were like men of their word, men of law. They needed to somehow legalize their relationships, their trade relations with the locals. And basically, when a ship arrived at some island and saw it was rich in resources, with a local tribe living by its own laws, trading and doing business, naturally they had to legalize it somehow. And most likely, that's when this concept was invented, that you can agree with any person, tribe, or state on anything. You put it all in writing on paper, you sign it, the other person signs or makes a mark, and if you wrote in that contract that you're giving beads, right, or tea in exchange for gold bars, well, sorry. Sorry, you already agreed, shook hands, and signed. So that's how these norms of English law basically took over the world around that time. The fundamental principle of English law is the agreement of the parties. So, Mikhail, you and I can also, following these norms, right, agree on anything. Once we've signed a contract, right, put our agreement in writing, then I will, or you will, make sure that all our agreements are being fulfilled. It doesn't matter if they're interpreted in your favor or mine. For instance, why this norm took root in Dubai, in the Emirates, right? Especially in the free zones, the economic zones. It's because people do business with the whole world from Dubai, having their company there. And you certainly shouldn't expect anyone to agree to Sharia law, right? Or local legislation when you're trading with, I don't know, Wisconsin, right? Or Delaware, or Hong Kong. So that's why the principle of English law applies there. Basically, you have a company, you have a partner from Hong Kong, you don't need to clash your local laws. You say, okay, we're working under English law, agreement of the parties, signed the contract, you agree, we agree. Let's ship the goods.
Speaking of a certain popular internet term, business the Kazakh way. In your opinion, is it a myth or is it reality?
Well, that term didn't just come out of nowhere, right? Our entrepreneurs from Kazakhstan are a fairly young, emerging group compared to how things are usually done in the rest of the world. So many mistakes are made out of ignorance, a lack of experience, or even a reluctance to learn, you know? I mean, you can learn beforehand and avoid mistakes, or you can make mistakes, learn from them, and not repeat them in the future. So I wouldn't say that business the Kazakh way is what defines every single entrepreneur from Kazakhstan. Right, but of course there is a certain amount of sloppiness, some informal handshake agreements. I think it all comes down to a lack of experience in doing business on an international level. Because the whole world, well, the part of the world that's been doing business for a long time, has already developed certain rules for how you should conduct your business activities. And if you stick to those rules, then there's a much better chance that your business will grow.
What's the main difference between business the Arabic way and business the Kazakh way? Or if you prefer, business the Dubai way?
Well, what can I say? If we're talking about business the Arabic way versus the Kazakh way, the approaches are very similar. First of all, our mentality is quite similar to that of the Arabs because of Islam. Because of religious concepts, because of overall some cultural characteristics, right? I mean, culturally, we are very close to the Arabs. And this connection is reinforced by the attitude of the local Arabs themselves toward Kazakhs. For example, I had an experience when I was applying for my residency permit. There was a whole line of people, citizens of different countries. I was standing in line, and some guy came out, saw me, and said, "Are you from Kazakhstan?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, come on in." So they quickly took me in ahead of the line. The guy taking the biometrics, the fingerprints, was so happy. He said, "Oh, you're from Kazakhstan. Let's get you through here quickly." Well, I was obviously very pleased with that kind of treatment. And I encountered this kind of attitude quite often in Dubai. So between Arabs and Kazakhs, there's some kind of, well, not a mental connection, but a cultural closeness, and it helps in doing business. Well, it works the other way around too. The fact that Arabs, well, let's just say, they also don't like that British, some kind of scrupulousness or pedantry in business. Big deals can be made over a hookah pipe, among other things. Just like here in Kazakhstan. Those are the similarities I've noticed.
Well, overall, where is it more fun?
It's not fun anywhere. Mikhail, the world situation right now is such that it's not fun anywhere. There are certain restrictive measures here, both in Kazakhstan and in Dubai,
Oh,
and in the Emirates. Overall, I don't think it's the time for fun right now. I think it's time to work.
well, we shouldn't be sad. Otherwise, there won't be any business.
Well, business isn't always fun. That's what I can say. In business, first and foremost, it's work, sometimes monotonous, sometimes thankless, right? Meaning you can do something and it won't give you the return that you were counting on. But nevertheless, it's interesting. So it's not fun, it's interesting. Doing business in Kazakhstan is interesting, and doing business in the Emirates is interesting. The thing is, when you reach a certain level of income and comfort in Kazakhstan, it starts to feel a bit cramped here. And Kazakhstan, let's be honest, is still on the periphery of global business, even now. But the Emirates, and Dubai in particular, are at the forefront of global business. So there's a different attitude towards you when you say you have a company in Dubai rather than a company in Kazakhstan, right? And after you try it and you succeed in realizing your entrepreneurial streak in Dubai, then basically the whole world is open to you.
I thought you'd say after Almaty. Since you're mostly in Almaty, it's more fun because of the sand and sun. Well, overall, I mean, in terms of the atmosphere, maybe the people are kinder there. The thing is, it's one thing when, say, Digital Bridge is held here, and it's another thing when some equivalent is held there. The difference is obvious, isn't it?
I wouldn't speak in favor of those Dubai conferences here, because the environment there is built so that you pass through filters and sieves and you end up all refined. On the other side, the entrepreneurs next to you are about your level, and you all seem similar to each other.
It's like KYC then.
Well, not exactly KYC, but overall, Dubai is just a lot of filters. And when you pass through those filters, you're surrounded by people just like yourself. In Kazakhstan, this filtering process isn't quite as refined, but that actually makes attending these kinds of events much more interesting because you meet people with such diverse outlooks on life. And the number of participants, in my opinion, in Almaty and Astana is still higher than in Dubai. In Dubai, everything is just a bit more fancy, you know? Everyone is so polished, always smiling at each other. It's a more Western-centric approach to doing business. In Kazakhstan, everything feels a bit more authentic.
Don't you feel like when you're in Dubai, you've stepped into a movie?
No, not really. For me, that feeling wore off a long time ago. I mean, I come to Dubai and feel completely at home. I've never felt like I was on some kind of exotic foreign vacation, as they say, right? Because of the similarity in mindsets and the fact that Kazakhstan's infrastructure has really caught up to the level of the Emirates, I don't really see a huge difference between them. Well, maybe just a bit more sun. And overall, I've always said that Dubai reminds me of Astana, but built without the corruption.
Combining business and leisure is just as hard, even in a different jurisdiction or a different region. Or maybe it's not hard, but just unnecessary in general. So it doesn't feel that way.
Once you have a business, you'll never truly have a vacation again. I mean, you just can't switch your mind off and relax. It's very difficult. And it doesn't matter where your company is, whether it's in Switzerland, Hong Kong, the Emirates, or Kazakhstan. You're thinking about it 24/7.
In our recent episodes, the topic of artificial intelligence has been coming up a lot. I'm sure you encounter it in your work routine as well. So, I can't help but ask your opinion on artificial intelligence. And first of all, people often turn to it for advice, right? First of all, the information is different everywhere. We all remember the example in Kyrgyzstan, for instance, where it answered in Kazakh instead of Kyrgyz and cited Kazakh laws. In Kazakhstan, sometimes uses completely different legislation as an example, right? So there are a lot of these kinds of flaws. And yet, even during job interviews, we're seeing a trend. It's very popular on TikTok and Instagram where people tape a phone up and answer using it because it listens to the speech and writes out the answers. What's your take on artificial intelligence? And if you don't mind, how is it viewed in Dubai? I'm really curious to know.
Well, as someone who's been close to tech for quite some time, I'd say the whole concept of artificial intelligence is highly overblown. What's being used now isn't really intelligence, they're just large language models. And how do they work, essentially? They work by predicting your specific queries and words. So it's a quick selection of what you want to see. Yeah, the information you're looking to find or learn. So, in fact, they're limited by the data sets that are publicly available. But even though the internet is quite advanced, a huge layer of information and knowledge exists outside of it, and AI can't process that. It simply has nowhere to get that data from. For some basic things, of course, the tools can be set up and used for work, like I do, for instance, and many other entrepreneurs I know. Well, people in general, really. We all use this tool in our lives. But it was marketers who started giving it all this charm and gloss just to sell access to these technologies to ordinary citizens. I don't support that. I mean, there should be an understanding of how it works and for what purposes you can use this technology. And of course, don't see it as a panacea for all your needs, right? Because there have been so many cases where people turn to these language models like Claude or ChatGPT with various rather private questions, and it ended up backfiring on them.
Speaking of things backfiring or going sideways, as someone with a legal background, what's your take on the regulatory policy of artificial intelligence in general?
In my view, it's just media hype. Being stirred up by someone? Yeah. Because, again, these technologies can be used in both positive and negative ways. And in my opinion, governments around the world haven't yet formed their stance on these technologies. And naturally, if a stance hasn't been formed yet, then there's no real regulation to speak of. I mean, they try to restrict it here, allow it there, but this market is so spontaneous, massive, and developing so rapidly that issuing some kind of decrees or legal acts with restrictions is pointless. In my view, it just won't work. So, well, at least governments aren't coping with this right now. Technology is evolving much faster than the laws that are passed to restrict it. So I think we need to change the regulatory vector, not just in Kazakhstan, but globally, to develop, like, for example, Isaac Asimov, right? In his novels, he developed the three main laws of robotics, I think that's what it's called, to also develop some kind of, I don't know, Bible of artificial intelligence, what we can allow it to do and what we can't, based on some basic human needs. But trying to regulate every single branch of this artificial intelligence? Well, good luck with that, but in my opinion, it's absolutely useless and pointless.
Over the last couple of years, we've heard at least a couple of interesting stories from America. Interestingly, for some reason from America, not from Kazakhstan again. The first case was when a person trusted, again, artificial intelligence for stock investing, gave it access to an open account, and at some point it just fell for a scammer's bait. He got scammed for several $1,000s. And he was like, well, it happens, right? So, and the second case is a story from not so long ago that a store was completely handed over to the control of artificial intelligence. They gave it, well, access to specific funds, limited ones, by the way, with a cap. And it completely automated the supplies, the store's operations, the employees. It even hired people itself. So, do you have fears as a businessman that, well, if not this year, then at least in 15 to 30 years, we might see something like this in the service sector, like consulting taking place?
As someone who tried to develop a certain story using artificial intelligence for company registration, I can say that technology is still being adopted very slowly in our time. That is, people are still much more comfortable working with real people, including when it comes to services, because when you trust your money, your time to someone, you want to see a real person on the other end of the line. Unfortunately, in the format that artificial intelligence exists in now, it doesn't provide that liveness, what many call
The vibe.
liveness, that is the human touch, right? So you realize almost immediately that you're not having a dialogue with a human. Consequently, you have less trust in this technology. So, to say that technology will now be implemented to such an extent that it will take away jobs? I mean, for how many years now has there been a discussion that, well, lawyers, you'll be the first to die out. Look at what ChatGPT can do. It drafted a pretrial claim for me and off I went and got my money back. Well, these are some very simple, basic things. And it's good that this technology exists to help. But for example, if we speak as a lawyer, then to me, a lawyer is even a kind of mediator between, say, two people, right? Two parties who are negotiating something with each other. And well, accordingly, if you see some technology as a mediator in the relationship between two people, then I have bad news for you. Because technology, even something like artificial intelligence, it won't understand, right? It will be limited by some data set. Well, but it won't have that flexibility. Well, you can't really compare it, artificial intelligence with a human. So I think we lawyers will still be around for a while. No matter how powerful artificial intelligence becomes, we will still be needed by people and businesses. Yes, we will use this tool to make our work easier, but talking about replacement is very premature.
The reason why, yes, you're right, I'm not a lawyer. Well, but as someone who's interested in various features, so to speak, in the world, right? Like the stock market is very popular now, and things like that, right? And people think, and if we're talking about, why not invest in local, right? Companies. Well, for example, local companies. But I can't just, and they'll all be LLCs. But these guys say we're a startup, we're raising investments. These guys say we've been working for a long time. And these guys say, oh, we just locked it, even though they've also existed for 10 years already. And so I would like, as someone who doesn't know legal law as extensively as you do, I'd like to know that this is definitely not a startup anymore. To somehow verify them? Well, just simply.
Sure, there are already a bunch of startups that deal with summarizing certain information about companies. For example, Copra, right? We use it actively. That is, there's a range of information about a company that you can gather from open sources. If you need a deeper audit, a personalized one, right, then you pay and order it. And you can also get data from closed sources about the company. So the main thing is tax turnovers. You can always check your counterparty. For example, if you want to work with someone, you go to certain websites, right? Services like Compra, and you enter the BIN, the information, everything you need to find out, you'll find out. So you don't have to guess if it's a startup or not. Because startup, again, is just a word that's become common, but from a legal or regulatory standpoint, it's not really used here. But you can always check a company, your counterparty, using services like these.
Speaking of investing, again, an investor starts digging. He digs and usually finds what you probably already knew. Well, just in case, since you also possess these resources where you can gather this information. Or do you see things that even an investor can never spot? So an investor comes to you and says, I want this. And you say, well, if you want it, we'll set up legal support or whatever else. But can you see or dig up something they'll never see?
Well, I can put it this way. An investor in Kazakhstan and an investor from, say, Britain or the States are very different. That is, our investor profile is quite conservative. And for the most part, investors don't look for projects. So, what is an investor? It's a person, an entity with a certain amount of capital they want to invest in projects with the goal of making a profit from that process in the future. And it's just how it is here, a cultural trait, that people look for the person with the money themselves. They go to them, they pitch, they try to get their attention because the main value in our country's investment environment is capital and money, not people, unfortunately. Whereas, say, in Western or other jurisdictions, the value is the human resource. That's why many investors actively attend networking sessions themselves, looking for, again, startups, looking for companies with growth potential, and they're not above being the first to approach and introduce themselves. Because they understand that there's more than enough capital in the market, but there are very few good, proven companies that are young and just starting out. So they fight for that attention. In Kazakhstan, the practice is different. There are many young, hungry people ready to realize their ideas with the help of a partner who will invest. But the practice is such that this partner, with money, with capital, he puts himself a step above and tries to somehow pressure the young entrepreneur.
They say that in Dubai, everything is transparent and everything is very, very, very simple.
But transparency works, as usual, both ways.
As some people like to say, it's two sides of the same coin and all that. And the question arises, if you take away the 0% taxes, what's left? And what else really changes when a company gets an international structure? This is one of the important factors, because as soon as a person or a company goes beyond Kazakhstan, not only does their legal basis change, and not just taxes, their whole structure changes. So what happens, Adlet?
Well, it's a fairly complex question. It's like it contains several questions in one. Of course, the state keeps an eye on its tax residents. I'll speak from a tax perspective. No one wants to let you go from their own legal framework. That is, where you were originally born, where you live, that legal system will consider you its tax resident. The global practice is 183 days, meaning where you reside for more than 183 days a year, that's where you'll be registered as a tax resident. So all your income will be taxed at the rates of the local legislation. Now about Dubai. A small side note, it hasn't been a zero tax rate there for the last few years. That is, in Dubai, as part of implementing certain strategies, they raised the corporate tax rate from 0 to 9%. So now the rate is 9%. You can apply a zero rate, but for that, you need to meet certain criteria, which most businesses in Dubai still meet, so many kind of keep quiet about the fact that the corporate tax rate in Dubai has become 9%. There's also a 5% VAT there. So you can't say that you're completely exempt from all taxes. In marketing, many claim so, but if you dig deeper, look and evaluate each request, each case separately, then you can say whether you can definitely apply the zero rate or not. So, an interesting observation is that there's this global practice on tax residency, which applies to you as an individual. As a person, you pay your taxes. When you open a company, the company must also pay its taxes. But the general setup we build, within international business structuring is you open a legal entity in Dubai. You're engaged in a specific activity that qualifies you for a 0% corporate tax rate. You might also be exempt from paying VAT, for instance. So basically, let's say you earned $1 million and paid zero taxes on that entire $1 million. Now, this company has certain founders and shareholders. And so, for example, if you are that shareholder as an individual, right? You're physically the shareholder. You also have to pay certain taxes. But the downside of our government is that it doesn't want to let you go as a tax resident. If, for example, the founder of a Dubai company was someone from, say, Sweden, right? Or the Netherlands, they move to Dubai, open a company, live there for 185 days, 183 days plus, and get a tax residency certificate, take it to the Swedish or Dutch tax office, and say, look, we're now tax residents of the Emirates, so I'll pay my taxes there. And in the Emirates, the dividend tax is 0%. So naturally, if your company earned $1 million, and let's say the profit is $100,000, you pay yourself those $100,000 as dividends. In Dubai and the Emirates, you pay 0%. But, for example, if you try to pull this off as a Kazakhstani, then under our laws, there is a dividend tax. You have to pay it. In order to get rid of this tax, you have to go through many procedures and meet various criteria, which, to be honest, 99.9% of our population simply don't meet. So practically any citizen of Kazakhstan, on the income they earn from activities in the Emirates, will have to pay tax in Kazakhstan. The good news is that there are more and more such citizens, and the tax office can't really process the transactions, right, or information on all citizens who have income abroad. So that's why tools were invented in the form of declaring, your assets and income. So basically, you're now kind of obliged to declare this yourself, to submit these declarations to the tax office. If you don't submit them, there's a fine, along with other additional charges.
You've structured deals, venture deals, for more than $2 million. And what common traits can you highlight in companies that get funding, besides having a good product?
It's the investor's attitude towards you as an individual. Well, I've seen a lot of cases where there was a great team and a great product, but they weren't invested in. And I've seen cases where someone literally at the idea stage, attract a large amount of investment in Kazakhstan because of their character, their personal brand, and their vision. Yeah, so money is often trusted not to a product or a company, but to a personality, the person, right, who's behind that product. So, you need to be a vibrant personality. You have to be able to prove to an investor that you're motivated enough to see it through to the end, that you're trustworthy, and that you have big ambitions.
You have, well, a global website that's designed not just for the local audience, but also for other languages. And it's very notable, I noticed that you have a site in Chinese. In the Kazakhstani segment, in consulting in general, almost nobody does that. And the question arises, what do you know about the next 5 years that we don't, Adlet, that made you decide to add this specific language to the site?
Well, first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to the people who lobbied for this action and made it happen. I'm grateful to those people. I can tell you about an interesting case. It happened literally 1.5 to 2 months ago. Some potential clients reached out to us, and they were originally from China, meaning they're Chinese. And just so you know, the information about opening a company in Kazakhstan was given to them by an AI, DeepSeek, based on the information that we posted in Chinese on our company's website. So the bot works. Information needs to be translated into different languages and made publicly available because search engines, and artificial intelligence tools, they process this information and suggest it to people who are looking for certain services. In my case, it worked. Some Chinese people searched through DeepSeek asked some silly questions, and the AI gave them my company's contact info. They wrote to me, we got in touch. There you go.
Convenient. Convenient.
So the AI, it processes it. And for example, if we're talking about Chinese people, they write their query in Chinese and get information back. So it's important for them to get information in their native language. I mean, it's easier for them to process and understand. And because of that, the trust factor increases significantly.
Adlet, thank you very much for such an extensive and wonderful conversation.
Mikhail, first of all, thanks for the invitation. Second, for such a meaningful, very interesting talk. And thirdly, thanks for the meeting. Always glad to meet with you, not just in the podcast studio, but also in everyday life.
Well, this was Mikhail Svetly. This was Business Kazakhstan, an xChief Central Asia media project. We are on YouTube, Spotify, and all podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes.